Welcome back to the podcast. So, today's episode is going to be slightly different because it's a bit personal. I am going to share my own journey with frozen shoulder and what I ended up discovering when I did some research. If you have been following me for a while, you may know that over the last several months, and even if you're on my email list, I have been dealing with what is called frozen shoulder. Severe pain. There were a lot of things going on. It was a long process. I'm doing a lot better. But honestly, it has been one of the most frustrating things I have experienced physically. And it started shortly after strength training. This year, that was my main focus, my main goal to incorporate strength training consistently. And at first, when I started to feel the discomfort, I said, well, I'm just sore. So I rested, I stretched a little, I took some over the counter medication. I figured it would work itself out. But instead, it got worse. And soon, I couldn't reach out and the cabinets, it was really disrupting my everyday life. Getting dressed became difficult. Sleeping on that side became very painful. And again, simple everyday moments reminded me that something was not right. So I know I started blabbling. Welcome to Prediabetes and the Path to Better A1C podcast. And I am your host, Jenny Pena. I am a national board certified health and wellness coach, diabetes prevention program lifestyle coach, founder of GenP Coaching, and creator of the A1C Reset Protocol. And I will continue to talk about this frozen shoulder, but I promise it does have a connection with blood sugar and it does have a connection with hormones. So let's continue. Now, everything was becoming difficult. I went to my PCP doctor, eventually started physical therapy. And even after the physical therapy, things were not getting better. Later, I had an MRI and it showed that there was a lot more going on than just muscle soreness. And like many people, I assumed that this was simply an orthopedic problem. And let me just do research. I'm getting older. My bones are having issues. Like I started thinking about all these things. And you can relate, right? Like I am a health coach and I know that panicking is typically not the issue and it's not the solution, but we tend to go in the panic mode. And just because it was so uncomfortable to do daily things, it was impacting my exercise. At times, it was painful even to walk. So I started doing research. And then I started discovering that there might be a much bigger picture to this. And that's why we're talking about it today. So, what is frozen shoulder, right? It's not just for women, men can also have frozen shoulder, but what is it? Well, frozen shoulder is also called, and forgive me if my pronunciation is going to be horrible, but we'll try, also called adhesive capsulitis. That happens when the capsule that surrounds your shoulder joint becomes inflamed and it gradually thickens and it tightens, right? Like being frozen. As that capsule tightens, your range of motion becomes more and more limited. And it typically develops in three stages. There is the freezing stage, and that's when the pain gradually increases and movement becomes harder. Then comes the frozen stage, where the pain may improve a bit, but the stiffness can become severe. Then finally comes the thawing stage, right? When you're defrosting, I guess, where mobility slowly returns. Now, you may be asking, okay, Jenny, what's the difficult part of this? Well, including the physical therapist that is a specialist and all that, he shared that it could take between a year or two. And I was like, um, you're telling me that I'm going to keep this struggle for 2 years? He's like, yeah, it may take months, but sometimes it can take up to 2 years. and share that this isn't just something that you can simply stretch once and move on from. So it's a long process. So as he was saying that, I almost had to tie it with what blood sugar is and all of these things. And in my mind, I'm thinking, wait a minute. This is exactly what my clients and what I felt when I heard about blood sugar. Wow, it's just like you can't just get the A1C levels change after a couple of tweaks, right? It takes some time. So I'm like, okay, I complained a bit and then I fine, just tell me what I need to do, tell me the routine, and I will just follow your instructions. So let's continue. But I kept doing research because I kept thinking, I didn't do the exercises wrong. What was the trigger? What is the cause, right? I love to learn about the root cause. So I started doing research. I noticed something very interesting. One thing is that frozen shoulder is much more common in women than men. In fact, women make up roughly about two-thirds to three-quarters of all cases. And most people develop it between ages 40 to 60. Now, if this sounds familiar, continue listening. That's also when many women enter perimenopause and menopause. Now, I want you to be careful here. The science, the research has not proven that changing hormones directly cause frozen shoulder. But researchers have noticed that there is a strong association. And one theory is that estrogen helps support collagen and the connective tissue and healthy inflammation. And as estrogen starts declining, tissues may become less resilient and recover differently than they did when we were in our 20s and in our 30s. So, hormones aren't the entire story, but they appear to have an important piece. But then there's also blood sugar. And this is the part that really caught my attention because, as you know, I just love all things about blood sugar, right? And because it's the world I spend every day talking about. So people often think blood sugar only affects diabetes, right? Like it's like, oh, it's type 2 diabetes. That's what I need to avoid. But then when people develop these blood sugar imbalances, there's a lot of other different things that are impacted. It's not just about type 2 diabetes, it impacts a lot of other systems in your body. So, chronically elevated blood sugar, it can affect your connective tissues. That's why some people have nerve problems and it impacts your entire body. And there's one reason that something is called advanced, again, glycation end products, like AGEs. Again, something that I didn't know much about. But here's the simple explanation. When glucose stays elevated over time, it can attach to proteins like collagen. And think of collagen becoming less flexible, less elastic, a little stiffer. So over time, that may affect your tendons, your ligaments, and your joints. And the shoulder is one part of your body that has a lot of different muscles, interactions, ligaments. There's a lot going on there. That my personal trainer and physical therapist, they explain a lot and send me some research, and it is amazing all of the interactions, how many different muscles are involved when we do these things, when we do simple things like reaching out or like scratching your back. The one thing that research is consistently showing is that people with diabetes are several times more likely to develop frozen shoulder than those without diabetes. So, even insulin resistance and chronic inflammation may contribute before someone is diagnosed with diabetes. Ding, ding, ding. You see the connection now? So, that doesn't mean that everyone with frozen shoulder has blood sugar problems. I mean, I know obviously it's something that I have to manage, but right now I am not in pre diabetic range. I'm doing well. I have been able to lose weight and maintain it. So it doesn't mean that everyone with prediabetes will develop frozen shoulder or anything like that. But it's another reminder that our metabolic health can affect far more than just our A1C levels. Now you may be asking, what about men? Well, men absolutely develop frozen shoulder too. The biggest risk factors include diabetes, thyroid disease, shoulder injuries, surgery, prolonged periods where the shoulder isn't moving normally. So women simply have one additional layer to consider besides the man, like all these things that I mentioned for men. And is that hormonal transition that happens during midlife, right? That has to do with the estrogen. Now, you may be asking, okay, Jenny, like, okay, it has the connection. Maybe you're listening to this and you're like, oh, like there's something going on in my shoulder. This is what's happening. What are you doing? And I'm going to share. The first thing that I did was talk to my doctor, talk to my healthcare team, really ask questions, really be open and ask questions. Physical therapy has been incredibly important, not just the physical therapy and the sessions that I do in person, but also the exercises that they assign so that I can do them every day. I have learned that there's a difference between moving your shoulder and forcing your shoulder. And also that more isn't always better, that incorporating rests between the exercises is better than powering through. And is that something when you think about mindset and stress, how it's not as great to just power through, but maybe incorporate those breaks? Also, funny enough, this is are the things that they shared and they connect with everything related to blood sugar. Consistency matters much more than intensity. Another thing that helped a lot was applying heat before my exercises and at times applying ice when it was painful and I needed to go to bed. And also being patient. Even though patient has not been always my strongest quality, having a child with autism and learning the skills that I use as a health coach has actually helped. And I also had to let go of the idea that I could simply push through the pain because I was so motivated and doing my strength training and all of that. And it was a bit upsetting that I had to slow down. But I'm here to tell you and to remind myself that sometimes resting is appropriate and sometimes movement is appropriate. The key is getting the right approach, the right diagnosis instead of just guessing. So, if you're experiencing anything like this, any shoulder pain, any significant loss of motion, don't assume it's just soreness from working out. Talk to your healthcare provider and do the same with anything else. Please get your providers to help you. There are many different causes of shoulder pain, and treatment depends on what's actually going on. I did physical therapy. Eventually, we saw that not much was changing, and we had to do the MRI, and that showed everything that was happening. So, even though lifestyle alone won't cure frozen shoulder, it absolutely supports your overall health and recovery because now you need to support the other pillars. I couldn't really go for my jogs the same way that I was doing. I couldn't really do a lot of the strength training exercises. I had to work a lot with my personal trainer to switch that. But that meant that I needed to focus on my nutrition, on my sleep, on my stress management so that I can support all of the other pillars of my health and wellness. So, one thing that I was focusing on was eating enough protein. I actually started incorporating creatine. Protein provides those building blocks for your body to repair and maintain that muscle and other tissues. And for me, that was important because I couldn't really do a lot of strength training. I was also making sure that I was getting enough of water and plenty of fiber, incorporating healthy fats, colorful vegetables, and just making sure that my blood sugar was stable, that I was having enough energy, and that I was supporting it and not just relying on my pancreas to figure it out and balance my blood sugar. Sleep was another priority because with the pain, it was extremely hard for me. The shoulder that was affected was typically the side that I tend to sleep on. So that was a whole ordeal in itself. And knowing that our bodies repair while we sleep, sleep became such a priority for me. And at times, it made me think how often we underestimate how much healing happens when we're sleeping. And then finally had to manage stress, right? When stress is high, also sleep suffers, recovery suffers. All of your healthy habits become harder because everything is connected. So you may be thinking, okay, Jenny, enough of the blabbling. What else is there for me? Well, I figured if you have experienced frozen shoulder, you will probably be able to relate. But there's so many nuggets that were reminders about managing blood sugar, setting up your habits, and how to pivot when one area of all of your habits need to shift. I was consistently exercising and working out and doing all these things, and everything has to go on a stop. So, my biggest lesson, and I wanted to share with you, and I know this is slightly different, but is that if there's one thing frozen shoulder has taught me, is that our bodies don't work in isolated systems. Finding out how hormones may affect your connective tissue and how blood sugar can affect the connective tissue and how sleep is so connected to recovery and helping your body heal itself. How stress can trigger inflammation that I was already experiencing. How movement can affect your mobility, how finding ways of still doing your daily tasks how you can support your healing with nutrition. See how it's all connected? And obviously, we cannot control every diagnosis, but this is what I tell my clients a lot. Some of my clients, sometimes they have injuries. Sometimes there are certain things that it becomes a challenge when it comes to nutrition because there are allergies and things of that sort. And if they're going on vacation, sometimes they're like, oh, well, I'm not going to be able to do this. I'm like, well, then support all of the other pillars, right? We talk about nutrition, sleep, stress, hydration, stress management. So if you know that sleep is not doing well, make sure that all the other habits are being supported, all the other areas are being supported. And if today's episode got you thinking, like, I should pay a little more attention to how I'm fueling my body, I'm going to offer you something that can help, especially for the summer. I've put together a free 3-day summer kickstart guide that includes 3 full days of simple meals. They all average about 90 grams of protein per day and include fiber rich carbohydrates, healthy fats. It will help you keep your blood sugar steady and your meals satisfying. Now, these are realistic meals for busy people with no complicated recipes. You can make ones and, like, okay, like you're going to enjoy the fact that they're very simple and that you can actually swap based on what your preferences are. So you can download it for free. I'm going to put the link in the show notes. And if you found this episode helpful, I would love for it if you subscribed, share it with a friend, leave a review, and this may really help more people discover the podcast. Now, I know this was slightly different from all of my podcasts, but this was something that really got me thinking, and it was deeply personal just because of how much it impacted my entire life. So, hopefully, you got some nuggets out of this podcast and you're enjoying the summer. Until the next time, and remember that small, consistent habits often have the biggest impact on your health. So, take care, and I'll see you on the next episode, as always, every Friday morning. Bye.